So first thing on the agenda today is the approval of the agenda. Is there any discussion or motion to approve the agenda?
I'll motion to approve the agenda and the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second them both.
All those in favor of approval of the agenda and minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Agenda and minutes are approved. Next on the agenda is review and consider the public comments. Hopefully everybody had a chance to read all the stuff. There was a lot of it. And with the individual email and then the attachments to the individual email and the variety of all the topics, I just thought it would be easiest if I consolidated them into that spreadsheet.
Yep.
So if you looked at that, you saw that
You want to try one too?
I went ahead and made some draft changes in the ordinance as a version 2, and actually subsequently a version 2.1 that had a couple of minor ones. The other thing I did is I added onto the shared drive a document just titled Record of Changes. So if we go through versions of this pretty quickly, we can keep tabs on what's the difference between 2.0 and 2.1 and so on. So one thing I would like to do, well, I'd like to get through as much as we can tonight. I mean, the sooner we can get through this, the sooner we can get our recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, but I want to make certain that we go through everything and address, anything that anybody has concerns with. So there were some things that I did not make any changes to the draft about. They were comments that, some things I thought it was easier to make changes to the draft and discuss it through those changes. Other things I thought it was better just to discuss the comment and then figure out what we want to do about that comment. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is some of the comments verbally and in writing talked about some confusion between the terms participating landowner and non-participating landowner. So what I did is said, all right, since that confusion is there and there are different definitions that could apply to both of them, I essentially scrapped that concept and said there is one definition of a landowner. That definition of a landowner is a person or commercial entity that has ownership rights of land and is listed on the tax assessment rolls as responsible for tax payments on the property. So it's very clear what a landowner is. And then I added a definition for turbine hosting land, which means the land upon which a turbine is installed. That's pretty clear. I don't think there can be a lot of confusion with that. And then I added adjacent property. Actually, I modified what we did have as affected property. I modified adjacent property. Means the property on the other side of a property line of a turbine hosting land, which is or may be impacted by the sound of an operating CWAC, shadow, flicker, danger from falling debris, etc. So I think that should clear up any confusions with regard to, well, what's the land that we're talking about? Is everybody okay with those, or we need to modify those some more?
No, I like those changes. And maybe I misread or didn't read, but in essence, if I'm renting a house from Justin and Justin's an adjacent landowner, I really have no say in this, correct?
Well, I did add, as a result of recommendations from Farm Bureau, there is a term that was added that is tenant, which means a person or commercial entity that holds a legal lease on the property extending specific rights to the use of the land by the tenant. So, and then elsewhere in the document, particularly where it talks about waivers and notice, it draws in the requirement to not just notify landowners, but notify tenants for notices. And with regard to waivers, that if the tenant has land use rights, then the owner or tenant of that adjacent land has to sign off on it. So it really then would boil down to what are the rights afforded to the tenant based on their lease agreement.
Right. Yeah, it goes back to lease agreement.
Right.
So if the lease agreement doesn't talk about,
If the lease agreement doesn't give you that level of rights, then
then
you
it,
don't have it.
then it becomes your fight, not my
Yep,
fight.
Right.
in
exactly.
essence.
Right,
Yep.
yep,
That's, and in reality, that's the way it should be,
right.
because the renter can move out.
Exactly.
Yep.
All right, so I do want to make certain that we address all of the stuff that I made changes to, but before we get into the draft itself, I want to highlight some other things that I didn't address, just so we can get some idea of our direction on that. So one of the public comments was that there was a duplication in the wildlife management area and in the definition for public recreation area with regard to public hunting lands. I did a review of the wildlife management areas that are listed by the Iowa DNR for Worth County. And those wildlife management areas do not include many of the areas that we have in Worth County designated as public hunting lands. So I believe that they are, in fact, two different things as we treated them originally in our draft. Does anybody have any further discussion on that, or can we close that comment?
So all public hunting areas are covered in those two.
Public hunting areas are covered inside the definition for public recreation area.
Right.
During the meeting, there was an assertion made that that's a duplicate because public hunting areas are already included in wildlife management areas, which is a separate category
But
that's
they're
defined.
both in here
But
still.
they are public,
They're completely
so
covered all.
public recreation area and wildlife management areas are still two different things.
Yeah.
And public hunting only exists inside that public recreation area. It's not something that is already encompassed under Iowa DNR wildlife management areas that I could see. I mean, they're just, you can pull up the list of wildlife management areas and these hunting areas are not part of that list.
And I suppose that comment was made more directed at the county level versus, the state level. And I think that's where it was going.
That's where it was going.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
There was another comment brought up by Farm Bureau that said our definition of significant bodies of water, and let me turn to that. The definition of significant bodies of water shall mean all lakes and ponds in the county that fall under management purview of county, state, or federal agencies, along with named rivers, streams, and creeks that are not solely designed as field drainage. Farm Bureau made the comment that Deer Creek in the northeast, well, first of all, they made the assertion that our significant bodies of water excludes drainage ditches. They then went on to say that Deer Creek in the northeast part of the county is a named water and is a drainage ditch. It also has outstanding Iowa water designation. The county should consider removing the distinction as many drainage ditches are considered to be waters of the state and have names. They're saying that in support of their argument that our significant bodies of water excludes drainage ditches. It seems to me their comment was rather confused, and as I read it, it may have confused you if you want to read what they've said. But clearly, if it's a named river, stream, or creek, which they're saying Deer Creek and these other things that have names that are also drainage ditches, they are part of significant bodies of water. The only thing that this excludes is if it is a body of water that is strictly designed as field drainage and does not meet these other terms.
Which is the one west of town.
Yep.
There's quite a few of them west of town that aren't named.
Right.
Goose Creek turns into the drainage field, but
Which then the drainage field is covered,
Well, Goose Creek would be covered. It's a
but
named,
not the downstream part on the
Right.
floor.
well,
But-
does Goose Creek evaporate? Does it go away, or does that body, does Goose Creek continue into this other
No,
body?
like what
of
they're
water?
saying is some of these creeks are tied in with some of the drainage ditches. So,
Well, where the distinction means something is in the draft right now, we have open ditch drainage has a setback, 600 feet or 110% of the total height. Significant bodies of water have a different setback, a half a mile. And significant bodies of water, the reason they have a different setback than a drainage ditch is both need some protection, but the significant bodies of water has additional protection, not just because of the water, but because of the surrounding natural area, wildlife, et cetera, et cetera.
But if you put up a 600-foot windmill, you're at 2,200 feet. You're at a half mile, in essence. You know, so you're talking, if you're talking the big ones, they're gonna be about the same distance.
Yeah, so
You
do we
know,
need
so is it
to,
a big deal?
yeah, so, well, that's the question. Do we need to do anything with regard to this comment? I think that their comment indicated a misunderstanding on their part, that we were excluding Deer Creek as an example, and we are clearly not. It is a named creek.
It is, but there's also Deer Creek and there's Deer Creek Watershed.
Yep.
Which is separate.
And the watershed is what's covered by the drainage tax and the drainage where Deer Creek is not necessarily.
Right.
If you dredge it, if they dredge it to provide the drainage, then it's.
Right, and
But yeah,
there's
there's-
other county issues around watersheds and floodplains and
Oh,
things of that
yeah.
nature. So bottom line, do we need to do anything with regard to this comment, or that comment is closed?
I'm fine with the way it is,
Okay,
you know,
all right, moving on then. There was a comment, it was submitted in writing, from John and Jen Patterson, that said, it's not clear who can initiate waivers and if the non-participating landowner must agree to such waiver or if the board can provide such waiver without their consent. We request improved language in this section. And my comment is, I think that the change in the definitions that we made with landowner, turbine hosting land, and adjacent property, that the language in the waivers updated accordingly shows clearly that the only way that the Board of Adjustment can approve a waiver is if that adjacent landowner signs off on an easement saying, yes, I'll accept the effects of the turbine.
I agree with you.
Okay? There was another comment that was regarding our spacing.
Yeah, I think they misread that.
Yep.
And I was
Yeah, well,
gonna
there's been
call
a couple of
him,
misreads on that.
And I,
Yeah, there's
because
been,
he's basically, he read it, they have to be 2 miles apart,
right.
not within 2 miles.
yeah, there was a misprint and I think we.
Yep, yeah, we got a correction in the paper on that. But this one says, the intention of this item is to, because it says that you can't have turbines that are spread more than 2 miles apart from each other.
Correct.
And so the comment says, the intent of this item seems to be to condense the overall footprint of the wind farm. However, the infrasound caused by the turbines located too close together is one of the most concerning factors. It's in the best interest of residents to have the turbines spaced further apart. This would limit infrasound infrasound, decrease cluttered view shed, and prevent non-participants from having 2, 3, or even 4 turbines surrounding their property. Turbine location near a home and the number of turbines in the location impacts property values and decreases quality of life. Spacing should be limited between turbines as opposed to not allowing sprawl. Now, this clause was copied out of Cassuth, much as many of our clauses were copied from other ordinances. I went back and looked, and frankly, I don't know what the rationale for that was, other than to prevent sprawl. I think the point that was made here by Sue, particularly in light of Mark Crowell also said during one of his original conversations with us, that when you bring turbines together, the sound is actually amplified. So I think the point is well made, to the extent that if nothing else, we should strike our spacing clause at a minimum and not require them to not be more than 2 miles, or not restrict them from being less than 2 miles apart. So there is, in other words, we're removing the restriction that says you can't have a turbine 3 miles from all the rest of the turbines. Or we modify it and address it in the opposite of the direction that it was going. What's the conversation? What are your thoughts? What should we say about spacing?
It's a double-edged sword there, big time.
But take the wind turbine that's closest to you. It's one turbine in the middle of nowhere.
Yep,
Okay, it's really affecting one person
yep.
in essence, or two, those 2 houses there. I
Right.
mean, because it is kind of isolated, but is it a big deal that there's one there and there's nothing around it? I'm kind of, when I originally saw that, I was like, the 2 miles makes sense, because that way, but at the same point, you sit and say, what difference does it make? How? If that's what you need to do to get the project done and provide enough spacing,
Right.
is it a big deal? Because at this moment in time, do any of us not look out our window and see a flashing red light?
I fortunately have a large shop that I built a couple of years ago that masks about 12 of them.
Well, I mean, they're all, if you go out at night in your
Yeah,
your
you're gonna-
yard,
yep.
can you see a flashing red light? And the answer is probably yes.
Yep.
Now, I can, from the tower that's been there for 40 years, the KY 102 radio tower, I mean, it's right there, but I'm just,
Right,
The original intent of that was to not let them blanket the whole county.
Yeah.
It was to keep it to a manageable project size.
yeah, and it
So-
limits the tear up of the infrastructure and the roads, because you're spreading stuff out and so on.
Sure.
But as I got to thinking about it more, particularly in light of that comment, it's like, well, yeah, maybe that's the wrong direction from a spacing requirement, that at a minimum, we should eliminate that statement. Then raises the next question, do we need to say something about,
Well, I think it would be addressed
The-
with
the
the number
volume.
of towers. We did have something in here that talked about a total number of towers.
well, but we
And-
don't have, we said that no project shall have more than 75 turbines, and there's another comment that says 75 is way too many.
So
Right.
if they're concerned, and I understand what she's saying, but if you get them consolidated, then the decibel reading's gonna kick in, or the
Right.
decibel level. So
the-
if they're tight or spread out, I mean, if they're tight and they start bouncing off each other, then the noise thing's gonna kick in. So I don't know if the 2 mile thing,
When they're tight, I believe that's where the infrasound becomes a bigger problem than when you
Right.
have one by itself.
right, yep,
But once again, what we've done is we've separated these aspects. So, you know, if everything abides by the ordinance and it's too loud when you group them together, well, then you can't group them together because of the sound, not
Exactly.
because
Yeah,
of
to
some
me, to me, that's,
arbitrary.
to me, that's not our
limit.
problem. We covered this, we
Yeah.
covered
Right.
the sound, to me, it just gets struck out,
Okay.
we don't care. If
So
we
I
wanna,
say we strike out the spacing clause
I
altogether.
think we all agree on that.
Okay?
yeah.
All right, next was the maximum project size. Says 75 turbines are too many in one area. Ta-da, 71 of them over there in Deer Creek. This will create an atmosphere that doesn't allow for peaceful, quiet enjoyment on one's own property, transform the viewscape, provide infrastructure, devalue homes. Right now, we say 75. I think the Worthwhile Wind project is anticipating 36 is the number that I've heard. How many it actually is, I don't really know.
49.
49.
Yeah, see, they've not provided the details yet.
Is what I heard from a landowner at the meeting.
Yeah, it's 49.
Yeah, so,
And only
and I heard
9
30,
built.
Yeah, and with this, 9 will be built.
yeah,
Yep.
and I heard
Really? I didn't
36
know
from
that.
Mark Proud.
So,
Who
but
knows? So, but the question is, right now, our draft says no more than 75. I came up with that number originally because, well, Deer Creek had 71, 75 was a nice round number.
I think you have to put a cap on it because all the other things that go with this, the engineer and the road permits. You know, at some point, how do you vet that this is 1,600 feet from somebody's house if you have to go out and check 100 of them versus 75 versus 20, you know? So to me, I think you do have to put a number.
Okay, so do we
You know.
like 75? Do we like 49? Do we like 50?
Does it have to be a turbine number? Can it be a number of acres?
Well, if you're allowing them to spread out, I mean,
You
Well,
know,
number of acres, well, I'm not sure how we'd come up with that number because number of acres is gonna encompass not just the turbine footprint, but the access roads as well.
yeah. I like
And that's gonna vary dramatically.
more complicated you get it, the harder it is to understand
And
it.
Right.
I can't see 75 being able to be built in one group.
71.
Well, right, but that's old rules, I'm saying with the new rules.
Yeah, yeah.
If the supervisors act on, well, what,
Yeah.
it's never,
Do you know what any
Right,
of the
that's
other
a good
counts are?
point.
it's never gonna
At the
happen.
top of Iowa ones?
Oh,
or
yeah,
anything
I
like
do.
that?
Yep.
Just
Yeah, they are all
reference.
much smaller.
Yep.
I have that data.
Yeah.
And you
I haven't
know, I
counted
mean,
them, so.
it,
Actually, there's a national database that every one of these turbines are registered in.
I understand
And
they're
so
trying to
it
limit
gets
the number and keep it manageable, but I don't really see the significance
Of a number.
of the number.
Well,
If they abide by the rules like you're saying, Justin, I don't care if it's 10 or 30 or 70, I don't,
you know,
it comes down to landowners' rights and waivers and rules and what's,
well, I think part of the thing is why you wanna maybe put a number on it, maybe you even jack it up to 99, I don't, you know, whatever, but one of the things is if our rules are gonna make it significantly tougher for them to put up a 600-foot turbine, and they need to put up 200-foot turbines
right.
to make the same amount of power.
Yep.
Now, all of a sudden, you're gonna have 6 turbines in this 240 acres versus one big one. So all of a sudden, then, that's where it could get a little more complex.
Yep.
I'm just
So,
thinking out loud.
yeah, so top of Iowa, the very first one had 89. Top of Iowa 2 had 40. Top of Iowa 3 had 18. Barton had 80. Freeborn had 1, and then there's the Windwalker that has 1. That's an average of 59.6.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Do we leave it at 75? Do we change it to 60, which is the average
Put it at
of
the
the
average
installed
and move on.
capacity?
I'm good with the
They can
same.
propose more than one project, right, if they come in and have a big area.
Yep.
Just one project is 60 towers max. If they need more than that, they have to propose more than one project.
I mean, each turbine is individually permitted.
right.
Right?
Yeah, each one you're paying $1,000
Right,
for.
you're having
each
to
one.
permit each turbine. So,
I think there's bigger fish to fry than
Yeah.
that, so.
Yep,
so 75, just leave it,
Leave it.
Okay,
okay?
that's,
sold.
Yeah.
thank you.
You know, I mean,
Okay. Another one. Well, it's the same, actually, it's just another comment on quantity. It says the number of turbines in a wind farm in a township and a county need to be limited to protect the residents. Actually, it's a continuation, no, it's a different comment. The density of turbines in one area has impacted weather serviceability, warn residents. We have a separate issue on the weather stuff. Turbine density also limits emergency helicopters from landing to provide rescue for victims of stroke or heart attack. The further distance from turbines are each other, the closer a helicopter can land. So that's,
Logan.
yeah.
And
So-
that is true,
They land them on the turbine roads.
but they'll land them on the turbine.
Seen
road.
it.
Yeah,
Land them where they need to.
Exactly. They'll
They,
stop
those
that-
guys are good
Yep.
okay.
when it comes to that.
Safety training. So we have language in here that talks about the applicant, meaning the developer, to work with local authorities to make certain that they have sufficient knowledge, training, and equipment sufficient to implement or assist in rescue during incidents associated with construction or operations of these things. It was brought up that we need to determine, well, who decides that the equipment and training is sufficient. So I reached out to Mark Tomlinson, our emergency management administrator, and I drafted language that said, well, our emergency management administrator should be the coordinator and make that decision. He essentially said, not my job.
I knew that was coming.
I did too.
You need to talk to the sheriff and the chiefs of all the fire districts. So I've reached out to them for their comment. I haven't got their comment back yet, except for one, and it was, language looks good to me.
Yeah. I have seen them training down by our house, especially Northwood here. They went down and trained in them.
Oh, the fire department has?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, next there was a comment that talks about, and I didn't address anything in our draft for this comment. It says, the notice of intent to construct should be mailed in written letter and mailed through the postal system to all landowners and residents within the proposed wind farm map, as well as to residents living within a 3-mile radius of the perimeters. Now, keep in mind this notice of intent to construct. Again, that was language that we lifted from Kossuth County. That language is there, essentially, originally in Kossuth County, because there were some proposed airports, private airports that were in the works. And they wanted to make certain that, well, if they get their paperwork in, they have first right. And that land that has not yet been staked out by the FAA is essentially reserved as a result of that first right. The wind companies needed a means to claim first right, and the county wanted to try to motivate the wind companies from providing their plans earlier rather than later, as they've historically done.
Correct.
So by adding the notice of intent, it provides a motivation for the wind turbine company to notify the county earlier, a year and a half in advance of when they think they're going to put in their permit request, to put in this notice of intent. At that time, they only have to have 75% of the land under easement. And they don't have any details of where the stuff is going yet. So frankly, I think requiring anybody to mail a letter to every landowner in a 3-mile radius of this potential zone is overkill. The notice of intent already requires that a notice is put in the paper for 2 weeks, that there is a meeting with the zoning administrator, it's posted on the county website, and I've added a public notice, a public meeting for comment as well. So I think mailing that at that early stage is not at all necessary.
No. I agree.
Okay.
When you get into the waivers and
The actual application of permits,
yeah.
when they actually apply for permits, then yeah, the ordinance says you gotta mail
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
notice to the landowners.
that makes sense, but
The intent, word's gonna travel faster than the mail gets there.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, so
If you
with,
go to the bar or the coffee shop, if you work out of the county, you'll
Yeah.
hear
Well, if you're a landowner in
That's why
Pennsylvania,
she's-
they're probably going to contact you anyway because you're the one that's probably gonna give them wind rights.
Yep,
You know, so I'm just,
Right.
even the remote ones have a better chance of hearing than too, so.
so in section 3, which is the permit application section, that also requires a public notice in the paper, posted on the website, and it includes a notice mailed to each landowner that is identified in the in the mapped area, so within the confines of that, within 1 mile of that project, those landowners are notified by mail. This comment was recommending we change that to 3 miles.
That seems like a stretch.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
excessive.
yep.
I mean, 3 miles away, you don't even have adjacent property landowner effects. So,
Nope.
I think 1 mile is
I
sufficient,
think so.
okay?
Yep.
Sound analysis. So, in our section 1, we establish sound limits, sound thresholds. In the application, we require the developer, the applicant, to perform modeling. Let me find where it's at. I'm sorry, it's in section 1 where we talk about the sound limits, is where it requires the applicant to perform sound modeling. And then during the application process, they're required to provide evidence and results of the sound analysis that was specified in that section. And then I've added a statement that says, included in the assessment shall be a sound level contour map that represents predicted wind turbine equivalent and sound levels represented with LMAX. I did that as a result of some feedback from the acoustician that Mark Helgeson was quoting. So they have the thresholds, they're required to do modeling, they're required to provide the results of that modeling for review during the permit review to make certain that it's legit, and they're required later in the ordinance that their turbines have to be compliant, because if they get noise complaints and they get tested and they're not compliant, they have to shut them down.
Yep.
In that system, I believe it's unnecessary for us to have to require the developer to hire some third party to do their modeling analysis. It's in their interest to do the modeling analysis accurately.
So you wanna set $1 million there you can't use?
Exactly.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, I'm gonna do my due diligence before I go put a windmill up.
Okay?
if they know they're gonna get policed, yeah. Otherwise,
Exactly.
otherwise they'll pull another Dennis Robs,
Right, but
know,
we've got the teeth.
We have
Yeah.
teeth now.
right?
And as a part of their application, they have to sign off saying that they understand they are legally bound to this,
And as of the moment, they are not legally bound
Right,
to anything.
to anything.
right.
Yeah. Okay, so
So-
we're not gonna make that change.
Nope.
The application decommissioning terms, so 3(4)(S). So this says, this is during their application, they have to provide a decommissioning plan pursuant to the decommissioning clause later on, along with evidence that the decommissioning terms are present in turbine hosting landowner easements sufficient for all decommissioning activities necessary to be performed. So they have to provide a plan that's compliant with the county terms and show that they have easements later on that's gonna allow them to get on the properties to tear the stuff down. This comment says the statement is too vague, this statement that says, make sure that decommissioning terms are present in the landowner easements, sufficient for decommissioning activities to be performed. They say that the lease agreement, easement agreement should be very specific, and the language in the agreement should reflect the ordinance requirements in section 7(1)(a). My response is, we can't dictate what are the terms between a landowner and the energy company. We can dictate land use terms, the ordinance can dictate land use terms, but we can't dictate the terms that Justin has with an energy company and his easement that he signed. What they're asking us to do is outside the authority of the county, I believe.
Yep, I agree with you.
Okay?
Landowner has responsibility
Exactly.
here.
Yep. So next, in the application process, it says, an incidental take permit shall be required in the event that a turbine in the project is planned to be sited within the Iowa DNR recognized buffer areas of any known habitat of a federally designated endangered or threatened species or bald or golden eagle nesting site. A copy of the incidental take permit for the federally endangered species, blah, 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 issued in compliance with the blah, blah, blah acts, shall be included with the application. A copy of the habitat conservation plan that corresponds to any incidental take permit shall accompany the copy of the permit. This comment said no turbine should be allowed within the Iowa DNR recognized buffer areas. Well,
But that was
elsewhere
5 miles.
in our ordinance, or in this draft, it says that they are required to provide a copy of their plan for review by Iowa DNR, well, a whole list of people,
Yep.
but Iowa DNR being one of them, U.S. Fish and Wildlife being another, for those agencies to then provide feedback to their plan, and they're supposed to provide copies of that feedback as a part of their application. And that if they don't abide by any recommendations from any of these agencies, they have to explain why they don't think they should abide and what are the mitigating circumstances. I think just a blanket to say you have to abide by recommendations would be overreach on the part of our ordinance, because if Iowa DNR feels that it's only appropriate for them to provide recommendation as opposed to a regulation, we shouldn't turn their recommendation into a regulation. It should be things that are considered. We have the considerations added as part of the review and approval process. It requires that the board review those things and determine whether those mitigations are satisfactory or not, and they can deny or add conditions at that time. There's just so many variabilities that I don't think that we want to take the approach of making a blanket statement saying everybody's recommendation has to be law. That's my opinion.
So they might be questioning, like, we had 1,600 foot for eagles, where the recommendation is 5 miles. I think that's what they're actually getting at.
Yep.
It's not a blanket statement, but
Right,
of
but
all of the.
right, but the same thing applies with the public recreation areas, conservation areas, et cetera. I view these setbacks, once again, setbacks are one aspect,
Right.
and these are minimums. There are other aspects that may require, just in order to comply with these other aspects, that they have to be farther away. I just think that,
Right.
particularly with
Sound
regard
and safety
to,
data have to
Yep,
apply
state and
as
federal.
well as our minimum setback.
yeah, I think state and federal recommendations, we should not take it upon ourselves to say that they are regulations now.
Because if they are regulations,
They should have made them, right?
they already, I
Then we
mean,
wouldn't have talked about it, we would have
Right.
copied what
Yeah.
they said and it'd have been done,
Yeah.
so.
you know, they have to
Okay.
abide by the, it's not like they can say, well, it's a state regulation, so I don't have to do it. They have to abide by all the state regulations.
Right,
But if their recommendation needs to be a regulation, let them make it a
Yep.
regulation, is what we're saying, right?
Right.
Okay, I'm with you.
Okay, another one was regarding operational maintenance. It said, suggest requiring all future and existing turbines to have a third-party inspection done and paid for by permit holders every 2 years. The inspection would check for structural soundness, all internal components are running properly, blades and hub are in good working order. As studies have shown, more fires and other significant malfunctions of the turbines are usually an oversight by workers and can easily be avoided through proper inspection. These inspection papers should be on file with the county auditor and made available for review. I don't quibble over the fact that sound inspection process helps you find things earlier. I think that's a fact. But we already require, we have a statement in the ordinance that says, as far as their operational, it says the each CWEX and Met Tower location must be kept and maintained in good repair and condition in accordance with manufacturer guidance at all times. If a CWEX is not maintained in operational reasonable condition or poses a potential safety hazard, the permit holder shall take expeditious actions to correct the situation, et cetera, et cetera.
Questions
And
like
they're
that come in.
required to have a maintenance log.
Questions like that come in because you hear stories of blades that were replaced, that were malfunctioning and stuff that,
Yep.
Maybe some higher up told them to ignore it, run it. I'm sure that's why they're wanting somebody to follow up. To me, it sounds a little excessive.
Yeah,
When they're already, should be policing their own thing. But maybe there needs to be something in there where a local person has some authority to say, we think something's wrong. I visually see something
Well-
wrong, or I can hear something wrong.
We
This
do.
needs to be looked at.
Yep, we have.
But if it's something major that's gonna cause a catastrophic, it's not gonna perform to their level, so they're gonna wanna.
Yeah,
fix
they're
it
gonna be
It's
motivated
no
to
different
fix it.
than having a hot bearing in your combine, you got
Yeah.
10 more rounds to go, you're gonna finish combining beans, you're gonna stop and change the bearing. These companies are doing the same thing, they've had bad blades, separating blades, actually, I think one of the articles I read was a faulty design blade that they knew was gonna come apart, they just keep running them until they get the new blade there, they don't shut it down. That's where some of this feedback is coming in. Policing,
But if you're operating at the safety distance,
well,
you know, and it gets.
your combine and beans right underneath it, there is no safety distance. I mean,
Yeah, I know.
it's, they're trying to police now. Look, these companies have done a shitty job of taking care of us and people are concerned.
Yeah,
And
no,
so
I
they
get the
want to
concern.
have
I think I think the concern is legitimate. I just think it's a bit too far
I think this
for
statement
us to
was,
say
as long as,
we require a third party to do inspections on your stuff every 2 years.
there's something in there that the county representing the people says, hey, we think there's a problem here, it needs to be addressed.
Yep.
Within, and I thought you had something in there like
It
that.
is, yep.
Within so many days,
Yep.
so that should cover that guy's.
Like
Yeah,
that seal goes
and
out
they're
or whatever.
required to keep a maintenance log on
Which would
each
be
one.
about every other one of them around you and me.
Yes.
I'm not kidding you,
I
it
know.
greases all the way down the
And it
blade.
also says they're required to provide the complete log to the county within 30 days of request. So if we think that they're
Yep.
nefarious activities,
That
the
covers
county
it
should be
then.
able to see it, so, okay?
Yeah,
And as a landowner, if I hear something, I go find one in text and be like, hey, fix that, or
Yep.
look at it,
Yeah.
look into it, you know.
And that sometimes is all the difference, hey, I actually had a customer complaint, sometimes the workers, your hands are tied.
Another one was regarding sublease. It said the commission may want to consider language to address wind farms' ability to sublease the space to third-party organizations. Many of the current turbine leases allow subleasing by turbine companies of the property that they hold contracts with to other large corporations such as gas and oil companies, large battery companies, other multi-billion-dollar companies. That may well be true, but I don't think, once again, that it is within the purview of the county, particularly in a land use ordinance, to dictate terms of sublease rights on the part of a leaseor. So I think that's something that we not address in the ordinance.
I agree with the statement, but I don't think it's in our purview. I mean, it's,
Right.
you know,
Okay? All right, so other than setback and sound, which we still have to talk about, all of the variety of miscellaneous kinds of comments that we had, we have either gone through in conversation just now and said what we're going to do or not going to do, other than all of the rest of the miscellaneous comments that are on here that I took a stab at addressing language, because a lot of the comments were related to clarity and things of that nature. So I want to set the rest of these.
The only other comment that I see you did stick, and maybe I'm segueing in, is the ALS system
Yep.
with the blinking lights. You just kind of added that into the ordinance.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a bunch of these comments. So everything,
Yeah, so.
everything on these pages that's not highlighted, we've not discussed yet.
Okay.
It's changes that I proposed in the draft.
Right.
It's just a lot easier, I think, to discuss it when we can
In the
look
draft.
at it.
Yep. No, that's
So
fine.
all of the rest of these are in the draft as proposed changes.
Correct.
What's not in the draft as any proposed changes is regarding setbacks and sound, with the exception of a couple of the definition kinds of things
Right.
that I added in there.
Yep. Okay.
So, do we start at the beginning and work through these, and then when we hit sound, when we hit setback, we jump to the comments, and then continue through, and when we hit sound, we jump to the comments? Does that work?
Yep.
That's fine.
Do you wanna look at this on paper? I've got
No,
it on my laptop here.
no, because, I mean,
You've got it memorized.
Well-
That's right, you said you had it memorized.
well, I went, you know, and Dana doesn't have a cap. Oh, you got it on your phone, but,
You want, I can pull it up here.
Oh, that's-
I'm gonna be honest, I kind of read through everything that's on there, and the changes he made, I didn't really see any, to me, the
They're
document is, I understand all the comments, and I appreciate all the comments, I really do, but I went through the document, and I'm like, the changes that Jeff made and are in red, I'm on board, Jeff, I don't, you know, like adding in the ALS, that was to me the major change in that document.
Yep.
Was adding that in. And
This is the only big significant thing, otherwise it was verbiage changes
Yeah.
and
A lot of clarity.
legalities, yes.
you know, and
Maybe adding some things that people were concerned about, but I mean, it was all just language.
it's all stuff, you know, there's a couple, like I think you added in, you know, it's in red, so we're gonna discuss it, but, you know, a couple of things on the setbacks, it was what, 2 miles from the town,
Yes.
you know. Oh, that one I had a
almost
little,
covers you.
well, I had a little problem with 2 miles, when you realize just how frickin' far the city of Northwood already is, and the city of Manly already is. Manly goes to the county line.
Well, Manly already has so the state law allows cities and towns to claim a 2-mile extraterritorial zone.
Yes,
Manly has claimed that zone.
yes,
So about a third, maybe a little over, I guess it's about a half of the Manly terminal falls inside, actually 2/3.
Two-thirds
Of the
of
Manly terminal falls inside that 2-mile extraterritorial zone.
yeah,
A third of the Manly terminal falls outside of that extraterritorial zone. So anything that's done inside that extraterritorial zone falls under Manly zoning.
yeah,
And so that 2-mile extraterritorial zone that Manly's already claimed would already prohibit commercial wind turbines from going in unless they were permitted by Manly.
right,
What the language that you're talking about that I am proposing in the draft just automatically places a 2-mile buffer to all of the city limits in the county for the purpose of potential expansion at some future date. So if they need, if they're gonna annex a bunch of land and expand the town limits, they'd be able to do so without having a wind turbine sticking in the middle.
Manly and Kensett are gonna touch like Clear Lake and Mesa City.
Well, that's the whole thing is if you take the current Manly and you add 2 miles all the way around the current Manly,
Yep,
and then you put 2 miles around Kensett, we now have the twin cities of Kensett Manly. Because,
What about
almost.
Silver Lake?
well, you know, that was where I was just.
Silver Lake's not a real one, though.
You know, because they can already go 2 miles, in essence.
Well, what
They
he's saying
could.
is Manly's already taken their 2
Manly
miles.
already has.
Manly already
Yeah.
has, and Northwood is reaching now.
Yeah, so the question then, with regard to that proposal, is do we just set from a county land use perspective and say, cities, we've put a buffer around you so that you can grow 2 miles in any direction without bumping into a wind turbine? Or do we stay silent on it and it's up to the cities if they want to go the route that Manly did and claim that 2 mile zone?
My original last week was I like the 2 mile zone, but then as the week went on, I went, let the cities deal with that on their own. I mean, that's just my 2 cents.
It's something else that the Invenergy in this case, whoever would have to get a hold of Northwood, wouldn't they? And let
No.
them build within the 2 miles?
No,
They wouldn't?
if we had the 2 mile in here, they wouldn't be able to. If they wanted to go within 2 miles of Manly, they gotta go to Manly. If we don't have anything in here, if they wanna come within 2 miles of Northwood, they can, because Northwood has not claimed that extraterritorial
To
zone.
me, the whole thing's kind of moot, whatever the word is, because these companies should know legally that they can do that. I don't know if we need to have it in there or not.
When one of the
It doesn't really matter.
Manly, Kensett, and Northwood growing 2 miles. Hate to say that, but
I mean, if they wanna have a city vote and put it in, they can
So-
petition to the county and say, we have this.
So,
Because they have the right.
they have the right
they
to
have
claim
the
that
right to do
today.
it, So
Yep.
why are we worried about them?
I mean, if
Okay.
you got it wrote in there, it's in there, no big deal, but
I
if it
mean,
isn't,
that was the big thing that I had of, you know, if I put 2 miles.
it'd be nice to have it in there ahead of time to stop any squabbling, but I don't,
But,
I mean, it's law that they
We-
can have it, and if somebody goes to build, the city's gonna say, we want this. Now we've already got it in here. I don't know.
It's in-
well, and the thing is we know Teresa George, who's on the city council, was at the meeting.
Right,
yep.
Okay, city of Northwood knows about it.
right, so they're
City
gonna
of Manly's
wanna,
already got
they're
2
gonna wanna put
miles.
it in there already, so we got it in there,
Yeah,
right?
because Manly's zoned.
Yep.
But this, if I'm reading this right, that would increase 2 miles outside of what Manly already
No,
has zoned?
No,
No.
Manly's.
Or,
It goes from the city limits. That extra 2 miles that there is officially called extraterritorial zone.
so
And this would just be city limits.
I would say let the city of Northwood, you know, to me, I'm kinda let the cities,
Let the
If they
cities
want it.
decide, okay?
yeah.
You're gonna be getting your mail in town.
Okay. So, we'll,
Yeah, and do they need it?
Yeah,
Cause right now, yeah, I mean, look at, there's, Deer Creeks are definitely, they gotta be within 2 miles of the city. I didn't
So-
even look, but-
as far as the introductory paragraphs, the definitions, does anybody have any issue with any of those?
No, I thought you did a really nice job, Joe,
Thank you.
really nice. Because it's those little things that you don't read, and then you read it 5 times, and it's what it says and what you hear.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Okay, all right, so Dana, have you had a chance to scan through? Have you
I
got
have,
any
yes.
issues?
No,
Okay, all right, so the next area that we get to then is setbacks, and there's a whole litany of things on setbacks. So Farm Bureau says the county should avoid situations where landowners have a turbine against the neighbor's property line or close to their buildings. Property line setbacks to the proposal with a maximum this is IEC. IEC deserves a whole separate comment here.
Yeah.
IEC, in essence, says that 1,600 feet far exceed what is commonly observed in Iowa counties with wind development. Well, the reality is, wind development ordinances in Iowa range from 600 feet to 1.5 miles, and a variety of in between.
Yep.
I've not gone through and figured out what the average is, but somebody told me one time the worthlessness of averages. You know, I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but if averages were the rule, then every person would have one testicle and one enlarged breast, because that would be the average. Averages don't apply in this case. They go on to say that in regards to setbacks, sound limits and shadow flicker being established at the property line instead of at a residence, the IEC notes that the U.S. Constitution imposes restrictions on regulations that exact takings from property owners. Right? We're all aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
They then cite a U.S. Supreme Court case, Penn Central versus New York City, that set out a test to evaluate claims of regulatory takings. IEC then goes on to say that the proposed ordinance may raise questions of about at least two elements of the three-factor test cited in that Supreme Court case: the economic impact of the regulation on the claimant and the extent to which the regulation has interfered with distinct investment-backed expectations. I pulled up that court case and I read it. IEC is trying to turn peanuts into jelly. What they're talking about, I'll read what I found. IEC implies that our ordinance results in public taking as a result of the property line setback. Presumably, we're taking from a property owner that wants a turbine, is their argument.
Yep.
I believe that's a veiled and unfounded scare tactic by the IEC. The court case they referenced was a suit brought against New York City, by Penn State Transportation, because the city would not allow them to build on top of Grand Central Terminal, because it was designated as a landmark, even though Penn State Transportation owned the building. The city said it was designated as a landmark and that forbids you from building on top of it. The denial was, the court found against Penn State. Penn State, again, took the city to court saying we should be allowed to build on it. The court stated, in a wide variety of contexts, the government may execute laws or programs that adversely affect recognized economic values without its action constituting a taking. And in instances such as zoning laws, where a state tribunal has reasonably concluded that the health, safety, morals, or general welfare would be promoted by prohibiting particularly contemplated uses of land, this court has upheld land use regulations that destroyed or adversely affected real property interests. So in other words, the Supreme Court said, yes, the city was taking certain rights away from the owner of Penn State by not allowing them to build on top of the land, and that's okay because it was within the interests of the health, safety, morals, or general welfare promoted by the contemplated uses of the land. So for IEC to make an argument that that court case could be read to be interpreted that our ordinance is a taking because we place a 1,600-foot property line setback to adjacent property owners, and it may negatively impact somebody's ability to host a turbine on their land, is fallacy.
Right.
The court case, in this case,
Completely
if it were us,
contradicted.
it's contradicting what
Yeah.
IEC said.
I didn't.
Most of that IEC thing, personally, I think is extremely outdated and biased, from what I've read.
I think
My
it's-
opinion,
yeah.
from what
I
I've
agree with
read.
that.
Because the overwhelming majority of the new setbacks are 1.5 miles in Iowa and out. That's the overwhelming majority of the new trend, based on more health and more knowledge and more time to gather the information, but
Yep. Another comment on setbacks said when they first came around trying to sell contracts, they were telling us they'd be 2,000 feet, then at some point went to 1,500. Our house, it's 1,100 feet. Not from our property line, but from our home. Adjacent property lines is currently proposed in the ordinance of 1,600 feet. We request increasing to 2,000 like they originally promised. Another one says, I believe if campgrounds get a 1/2 mile, homeowners should get the same or at least 2,500 feet. Another one says the greater of 2,000 feet or 4.5 times the height or manufacturer safety distance. And then it calls attention to the June 2019 presentation from Invenergy for 2,000 feet. Another one says the proposed 3.75 times the height of the turbine is excessive and it will stop wind development in the county. The Iowa Environmental Council says setbacks from property lines should be approximately 1.1 times the turbine height.
that must have been math.
Another one says most counties specify setbacks from neighboring property lines in addition to residences. We recommend setbacks from residential dwellings from 1,000 to 1,200. Another one talks about a review by the Forensic Appraisal Group that found the overwhelming majority of realtors say that wind turbines negatively impact property value. Not the property value that the turbine sits on, but the property value of the adjacent property. Another one says why are public recreation areas granted a 1/2 mile setback and acreage owners are only granted 1,600 or 3.75. We feel non-participating acreage owners should get the same treatment as public recreation areas. 1,500-foot setback from non-participating residents was reasonable. When you take it to a property line, that's excessive. I have several neighbors that were looking forward to a wind project on our land. I asked him about that. It was Ron Balick from Manly, and he said, no, that was an error. He has several neighbors that were looking forward to wind projects on their lands.
Follow the money.
If the county should consider minimum setback distance from residential dwellings, we do not recommend exceeding 1,500 feet, which developers have indicated is the top end of which is typically workable. That's from the IEC. I believe city limits and zoning district boundaries should be set back 2 miles. We've already talked about that. Regarding setback for protection of conservation areas, support DNR guidelines is encouraged. I think we already support DNR guidelines. We require that they look at the recommendations.
It's time to read my Bible verse.
The proposed ordinance
It is.
lists 1/2 mile from public recreation, 1 mile from public conservation, 1/2 mile from woodland. Again, these seem excessive when compared to other counties. Adequate setback distances protecting the county's natural resources will necessarily vary. Some counties, rather than mandating setbacks by type of resource, approach the issue of protecting natural areas on a project-by-project basis. By requiring applicants to consult with the DNR, which we do. The commission has not followed the minimum guidelines by the DNR. There's no reason the commission should deviate from the DNR recommendations. The ordinance does not adequately reflect the plan or take the county development plan or take DNR recommendations into consideration. And well, this other one is weather radar. I'll hit that one separately. So those were comments all specific to setback. Once again, I think underlying a lot of people's concerns that our setback is too short are voicing those concerns on the grounds of sound. And we should address sound, we do address sound separately. Those that say our setback of 1,600 feet from property lines is too far, I counter with the whole conversation about taking away the neighbor's rights. Landowners that get a turbine sign an easement and are compensated for giving up the rights of the effects of the turbine. It's in the agreement. It states explicitly, you give up your rights regarding sound, vibration, shadow, et cetera, and they get compensated for that. It's only right that their adjacent property owners have that same opportunity, that they either are not subjected to them or they have an opportunity to sign off on giving up those rights and be compensated. Our ordinance provides for that.
The people that are talking the 1,500 and 1,600 feet being too far are people that are either signed up or promoting wind power. The same company that originally said 2,000 feet and that they was gonna take care of us, and they're not. They're not taking care of the people, that's why we're here. We have to take care of the people.
So I think property lines is the appropriate place for the marker, not the residence.
Absolutely.
I think the language that we have with the 1,600 feet, 3.75 times the total height, manufacturer safety distance, coupled with thresholds related to sound, which may drive those things farther back if that's how they have to address the sound threshold.
At the meeting on the 16th, overwhelmingly, the 2,000 feet came up. On the write-ins, it was 1.5 miles. Our health panel, well, Seamuth was 1.25 miles. I don't remember what Dr. Johnson was. I don't remember what his recommendation was. He had a really awesome letter with a lot of facts in it, but I don't remember the number.
What's his stake in it?
His was all about, somebody had contacted him,
Somebody
yes.
contacted him.
Yeah, but I mean, he doesn't have land in the county, he doesn't
No.
have, I mean,
I think it was just another medical opinion, I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
He doesn't say
that's how I
anything
read
about,
That's what it was.
yeah, he doesn't say anything about setback, he just says, it's very important, the sound emissions should always include qualifiers of LMAX fast, which we have, and including assessments of noise levels using DBA and DBC filters, which we have. He says, it's important that your ordinance reflect both compliance with minimum setback distance and measured noise levels.
The interesting part of some of this is, you know, you kind of got that division of the pro-wind and the anti-wind, okay? One of them says it's too far, one of them says it's far enough. What we're not hearing here, and what we're not seeing here, is a lot of the participating landowners that set up rules saying, hey, we don't want one here, we want so much foot there. And the company pretty much trampled them, stampeded them. And they had to hire lawyers just to get back what they were originally promised, okay? Because some of the people that are signed up are saying, I don't want it this close to my neighbors or me or whoever, and they're not getting listened to by the same company they signed contracts with. That's why we're here, to get the margins out. There's already a wavering process to get them back down. What are they gonna waiver? Nothing minus nothing? They gotta have some footage. And most of the people I've talked to, I personally think 2,000 feet is way too shy. But that's a number that came up a lot at last week's meeting.
And I agree with you on the 2,000 feet. I'm still not 100% for the property line, but I wasn't at that meeting, that's what you guys, I'm fine, whatever.
What?
But, and the reason I say that, I understand what we were talking, or what Jeff was talking about with, you know, the non-participating gets some too. I get that. And if, in the 2,000 was what was discussed, and I 100% agree, because I got a 2,000 a bunch of times in here.
Well, and the 2,000, I want to make a note too, the 2,000 was to the residents.
Right, and I have no problem with that.
Not the people that was at the meeting.
No, at the meeting, they wanted
They wanted
2,000.
2,000.
Yeah,
Period.
yeah, no, I
Yeah.
understand, I'm talking about the presentation that people keep
Yep.
quoting.
Oh,
the
from
2,000
Invenergy
feet.
before.
Right.
that's to the
That
To
was
the
residents.
2,000 from
That is
Invenergy.
to the
Right.
residents.
Yes, and
Right.
I, again, one person's opinion. I agree the residents needs to be farther, you know, but I still struggle with the property lines. And the reason, oh, I'm gonna, just let me finish it then. The 2,000 feet everybody was talking about at that meeting. Again, one person's opinion. If that went to 2,000 feet, this 37-page document might as well get thrown in the garbage and say, Worth County bans all wind. Because you take 2,000, a half mile, that's a half mile. Well, you can't put a turbine in that quarter section at all. So then all of a sudden you got 80-acre fields. That's gone. 40-acre fields, gone. I understand there's waivers that can be signed. I get that, by neighbors. But if neighbors don't get along, you know, if you take that to 2,000 feet, there is 0 turbines in this county. No, I'm not, you know, I'm not saying they can't, but we pretty much basically said, you can, but you're not gonna be able to build them.
Well, once again, and this is, I think we run into this all the time, even in our own individual minds when we're talking about these things. Because we've been trained, if you will, over the last 20 years in wind turbine discussions to talk about setbacks as the tool by which we're gonna manage the ill effects, all ill effects.
Yeah.
Our brain doesn't automatically separate these things.
Right.
You know, we went through a pretty considerable discussion within the commission on the separation of these things, that the technology, the means exists to manage shadow flicker independently from anything else. We don't have to have setback to manage shadow flicker. We know that we can establish thresholds for sound, and we can manage the sound to those thresholds regardless of setbacks. It could be silent with regard to setback, and we could still accomplish those objectives through sound thresholds and management. Setbacks, we had discussed and decided, was really all about safety. So then the question became, well, if setbacks are for the purpose of safety, it's just this other aspect, what is the appropriate distance? All of these recommendations that we're hearing from people on setbacks isn't looking at it through that lens. They're looking at setbacks encompassing all the rest of these things. They'll come along, they'll learn. The important thing is that the ordinance addresses it for them, and they'll learn through time that these are separate things. So then, to my mind, the question is 1,600 feet, or 3.75 times the height, or the manufacturer safety distance, the appropriate distance for safety to the property lines, so that we're not taking away future rights of that landowner's ability to build?
Well, I know the majority of the people at the meeting last week, especially the White Crows, most of that stuff is based on actual data, safety data. I personally think that they have, when they recommended 2,000 and 4.5, they have tried to make that already excessively small compared to the safety data, just to try to get it pushed through. There's also the visual aspect of it that we're not focusing on because we're trying to focus on the safety. But when you focus on the safety, then I could easily argue we go right back out to 3,300 feet on a 500-foot tower for the Lightning. And that was one of the slides that we had. That's actual manufactured data. So we want to argue 1,600 feet, 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet. If we're talking safety, I mean,
Yep. I think another thing that we have to consider too is ultimately the ordinance has to pass. The Board of Supervisors have to be comfortable with it, and the Board of Supervisors have to vote to say, yep, this is what we want. Well, we know one of the Board of Supervisors, there's a 95% chance is going to vote against it no matter what it says.
right.
Correct.
The other two supervisors, I think, are looking at it with a bit more of an open mind, recognizing that, yeah, we do have to have some rules. So part of our challenge, I think, is to try to figure out, well, what level of rules is a good level of rules that meets our goals and could get passed. I'm concerned because of all of the rest of the noise. If the, you know, there's already a lot of, noise, if you will. The setbacks should be to residents, not property lines. I think if we raise this too high, it's not gonna fly.
As far as the property lines, we pretty much established at that meeting, that's the way it should be. Okay, and as far as property lines, this is about property lines, not where you build your house, where I build my house, it's about property lines. So that part, we're already done with, that's done, it's a property line, not a residence
And I
issue.
agree, we're done, but
You
to your
know.
comment there, one of the comments was made that the reason this is that far away from property lines is in case you wanna build a house in a far corner.
It's not just about a house.
No,
I might
anything.
wanna build a pond
I
and
understand
enjoy
that,
it.
but that
Yeah.
was, you know, so it's kind of, but, anyway, that's just my opinion, but.
You know, if you wanna spend time in the garden or build a pond, you shouldn't have to be subjected to
I
those
understand.
noises.
I understand.
You can't
So,
be
yeah.
a hermit.
But setbacks have absolutely nothing to do with what you just said, noise.
Noise. Yep.
With
When you,
with
when
the
you
noise
go to,
part of it, right.
when you go and talk to anybody in Deer Creek, you talk to anybody in Barton, you talk to anybody that is living near a windmill, what is everybody's concern?
Noise.
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 Yep.
It is
Noise
noise.
and shadow flicker.
Well, that's one of the reasons we've put a
Yes.
height restriction on it, because I don't care if you're 1,600 or 2,000 feet away, you can't really tell. That thing is so huge
Yeah.
and invasive, you can't tell the difference. It's right there either way.
Yeah,
Okay,
from a
I mean, I
view-
get
From a
that.
view perspective, yeah.
Right, from a view
So,
aesthetics.
so let's do this. We do like we did a couple of meetings ago. We've seen, read, heard the comments. They're too big, they're too small. Let's just go around the table. We know what the language says now. So first of all, you don't even have to say what you think it should be, just do we keep it or change it? Justin, keep it or change it?
Keep it.
Dan? I'm sorry, David? I don't know where I got
I get to
Dan.
vote for you.
Well, see, my recommendation on a setback is safety distance, the manufacturer's safety distance. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't care if it's 1,600 or you
Okay.
build a smaller one that can be safe at 500 feet. I really don't care. It's safety.
So keep it or change it?
So I'm good the way it is because it's safety distance.
Okay, Todd? Keep it or change it? Change it today, change it 6 months from now.
Right. For the sake of getting our 85% done and getting it in, leave it.
Dana?
I believe it should be over 10 miles. Honest to God, for health reasons, honest to God. And I would love to see the 1.25 that our health board has recommended. But to give the supervisor something to work with, I'll bite my tongue for now.
That's what I'm doing. Biting my tongue to give them something, let them deal with it.
Right?
Because I think we both have a little bit of concern about the property line. We both have a little bit of concern, I mean, this whole thing's a give and take, but I'm sorry, Dana, we were about to hear what you
Yes.
wanted to
Done
say,
you too.
so.
She was ready to say
Keep
no.
it or change it?
I was going to say keep it, but I want to ask the question where I think you're potentially leading to. Does the setback need to be to a dwelling and the sound, shadow flicker, anything else from the property line?
Oh, you're getting technical.
I'm asking a question.
Well, we went with property line for all three aspects.
Right, I understand.
And,
But in light of some of the conversation that's been happening, is that the appropriate?
That's pretty interesting, that's awesome, but I still stand by the fact that this is a property line issue.
I
It's
I
a
mean, if we're
property
talking, if
line
we're talking
issue.
safety, it's still potentially going to then fall on my land, right?
Correct,
If
Correct,
it's
yeah.
not, if it's my dwelling, not my property line.
yeah.
Right, yeah.
Where, that's where I'm saying keep it at the property line, like we've discussed, but I want to vet that question a little bit.
that's where I would go, is, I would keep it.
Is
as
that
is.
your professional opinion?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
you going on record
that's
with
my
that?
I do
opinion,
like that,
completely
though.
unencumbered by facts, right?
That, yeah.
Don't give him too many ideas.
I like that.
He's got a lot more ground than you and me. It don't affect him like it does us.
I'm already covered most of them, so,
Well,
and they're a lot smaller, so they don't make near as much noise.
Absolutely
Then the-
huge difference.
Yeah, I mean,
Sight
not to make
pollution,
this,
noise pollution,
not to
everything.
make this longer, but yeah, I mean, you know, I'm sitting out there going, and I know your dad's in the middle of these, but I'm like, you hear them, but it's
It's
occasionally.
totally different
But
for
boy,
him than
when
it is you and
when
me.
you look at Deer Creek up there, oh,
Yeah.
them blades are so darn big
I think
that the
if-
whoosh happens more often.
I believe that splitting any of these from property line to residence is it's trying to cut the baby in half.
It is,
just
and it
doesn't,
ruins
it
all
doesn't
the work we
work
did.
because, well, the reason I say that is because my property is not just my house.
Right.
You know, that may be the higher taxable aspect of my property, but my property and the rights of enjoyment of my property are encompassed by my property lines. My rights start at those lines. Justin's right starts on the other side of that line.
Legally, for all pollution reasons, every law goes to the property line. Does not go to your house, goes to your property line. Legally, in all the things I've read, especially about the windmills,
Right, and-
windmills think they got a bypass in this because Red Barn, Red Barn, Red Barn. They came in and set this distance, and so that's what's in your head, and so you don't think about something different than what you've been told for the last 25 years in Worth County, that 1,500 feet's enough. And we're here because it's not. So we left it, right? That's what we said?
I think so, because
Thanks for leaving it. Okay.
I think our problem is we all want something different, and it's a compromise.
Yep. All right,
So let them do it.
now,
Your neighbor says we can't compromise our health.
weather
Which
radar.
one?
Well, the one that counts.
Weather radar was another setback issue. You heard Jake talk, and there was a presentation that was provided as part of Sue Loken's written comments, a considerable PowerPoint. They talked about the National Telecommunications Information Administration should weigh in on this stuff, as well as the National Weather Service. What I have added in as a proposal is that we add National Weather Service as one of the reviewing agencies in section, whatever section that is. So I've added National Weather Service as one of those agencies. I did not add the NTIA because I looked them up. NTIA is the executive branch agency, executive branch as in White House, agency that is principally responsible for advising the president on telecommunications and information policy issues. Their programs and policymaking focus largely on expanding broadband internet access and adoption in America, expanding the use of spectrum by all users. I don't think they have any bearing on this stuff, particularly with regard to weather radar.
So that means they gotta submit their plan to NOAA.
National Weather Service.
And
Yep.
they,
then
National
they
Weather
would
Service would
weigh
make
in.
their recommendation to
Yep.
the supervisors.
Well, they would make the recommendation to the developer, and then the developer takes those recommendations, adjust their plans. At some point, the developer has to provide their plans to the county along with the recommendations from National Weather Service and say, we abided by those recommendations this way, or we did not abide, we did this instead. And then the Board of Supervisors can say, well, no, we don't like that, you gotta abide.
So my concern is, not a huge deal, but my concern is, there again, it's a recommendation, just like us with the state recommendation instead of
Right.
a requirement. I think it's a big enough issue that I just wanna make sure that it's not overlooked in the paperwork or in the developer's plan.
Yeah, that's a matter of
something
the
that the
diligence.
supervisor's gotta,
That's a matter of the diligence that the supervisors are gonna have to do as a part of their review.
Because
And-
as a
and it
safety
does
thing, that's
require
huge,
the
but-
zoning administrator to do a fair bit of the groundwork
started to read
before it
that.
goes to the supervisors. So the zoning administrator is supposed to look at these things and call out differences.
yeah, so there's a couple of checks and balances
Yep.
in there to
Yep.
at least draw attention to it,
Yeah,
Yep.
cause I don't, I
Okay.
got more questions about that. but-
And that wasn't something I'd never thought about, that it
No.
might
I hadn't
cause
either.
problems,
I've heard
'cause
the-
we want the radar, I
I've
mean.
seen, well, I'm just, with just any general rain, it's like, oh, it's coming, and then all of a sudden you look and it's these little circles, and then it's gone. And you're like, oh, wind farm, wind farm, wind farm.
Yeah, well, and I've
Yeah.
heard, I guess I've never seen that, but I've heard the weather people or the storm people talk about, you know, the ground
Yep.
turbines, and I thought they were kidding.
Especially if they try to zoom in tight on it, in a snowstorm especially, you'll pick out all these little wind farms.
I'll be
Yep.
dang.
Yep.
okay, so moving on. We get into other standards. As you noted, David, I added the aircraft detection lighting system in the lighting aspect.
Does AirMed use that? I would assume they do, but
I'm sorry?
would AirMed use that?
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
assume they would.
Yep.
I just don't want, as low as they fly over my house, I don't need them hitting one of them.
Right,
No,
right.
no,
Because they
no.
go over your road.
Yeah, and there is, and I referenced in here, the FAA circular
Yes.
that they came out a couple of years ago and said, yep, you can use this, this is authorized stuff. And so I said, use it in accordance with the FAA
Yep, okay.
guidance.
Okay.
See, like a lot of the airports, you just key your
Yeah.
radio to get the lights on to land. They
Yeah.
don't keep the lights on at the airport
Right.
anymore.
Oh, I wondered about that.
No,
Okay.
it's the same thing. I mean,
Uh,
they don't have,
That's interesting.
yeah.
So I did a little bit of changing in the sound area, subparagraph K on page 14. Essentially, I added in the LMAX fast. I did find the G filter, a decibel level recommended for the G filter for that low frequency stuff down below 40 hertz. So I've added that in there. I also made a note, we had sound level for participating landowners and non-participating. And it dawned on me that the participating landowners may already have given up their rights to these thresholds as a part of their easement. So I've added that caveat in there, recognizing that those thresholds don't apply if they've already given that up in their easement.
I know Matt Helgeson had mentioned that maybe we shouldn't have that because of, I don't know, one person in the household speaking for everybody or to protect. I think it's just worth bringing up that he thought that should have stayed in there. There shouldn't have been a difference between participating and non-participating landowners because of the fact that it's a safety issue, trying to protect the other people in the house other than the one decision maker.
Well,
I don't really want to go there, but it was worth, as a very
Yeah.
valid point.
But I
You
hope
know,
they get
they
along
are,
good
they
with
are
the
different
house.
level thresholds between the participating and the non-participating. The non-participating, those thresholds are set based on what all of the data I read said a quiet rural environment level is. These levels. So that's what I set for the adjacent property owner. For the turbine hosting landowner, I set the levels that people are saying are the typical sound levels. Not the ambient sound, but the typical ordinance.
Now,
levels.
I'm having a little trouble understanding some of this, and I expected to see 35 and 40, but I think it's because we have the max in here now. That's why these
The
numbers are
LMAX.
this way instead of the way we had it before, right? And this is gonna make it so that they can't average days that the wind tower is not running.
Correct.
This, right, this covers all of that, right? I
Yep,
mean, so that
yep.
it's a max number, not an average number. Okay, I
Yep.
think that pretty much,
Yeah, 'cause that's one
Layman's
way to get
terms.
around it. Oh, we just don't run it for 3 days, and then we
Yep.
run it for 3
Right.
days.
yeah.
Yep.
The average is good.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
One testicle.
Remember, yes, I was just gonna say, remember averages?
Okay.
You know, that ruined me.
Did you change the daytime hours Did I see that?
I
Yeah,
did,
you
yes,
did.
yeah, good point, thank you. I did change the daytime hours, I did that in the definition. So instead of putting it just in there, I thought it deserved to be in the definition.
Yeah, I saw
And I did change it to,
9 PM.
yeah, 6 AM to 9 PM for daytime.
Now, my neighbor, night begins at 8. The other neighbor, it begins at 2 AM. So,
So Jeff, I can't remember how I was gonna say it. You talked to the acoustician and to Matt with these numbers. I mean, you guys are all kind of on the same page with that?
Yeah,
Or
I talked to,
you want-
I had email conversation with the acoustician.
Cause I get lost when I try to read all this stuff. I'm sorry. My ADD
Yeah,
kicks
so
in and I
essentially,
just,
what it does is it says, daytime,
I can admit it.
essentially it says daytime is, just by nature of daytime, there's more stuff going on.
Right. But this,
It's louder outside than it is at nighttime.
but what we
And
have
so these thresholds were written in, and you'll see they actually went down,
for night, yeah.
yep, to recognize that.
Yep.
And
I know
the
Seamus
different
talked
numbers
about it.
between the A filter and the C filters, because the A filter penalizes the lower noises, the
Right.
lower frequencies.
Right.
And so that's where the C filter kicks in. And because there's no penalization, you're not subtracting decibel counts
Mm-hmm.
from it, the C level numbers are higher because
Right.
they're more natural.
So this is what we have in here and what the acoustician and what Matt was proposing, it's all about, is there the same
Yep,
numbers?
Yep, and the LMAX fast to
Right.
specify that so that the turbines don't use the averages,
Right.
okay? All right, moving along. Let's see what we have for sound here. Well, there was a lot of sound comments that were, once again, using setbacks as far as their sound.
lots of comments.
Yeah. This one says that the proposed sound standards exceed the recommendations published by IEC. The recommendation of IEC is that they not be set lower than 50 dBA, which is what we set for the turbine hosting landowners at 50. Non-turbine hosting landowners, the adjacent landowners, theirs are down to 45, which is twice as low as 50. The IEC brochure that was provided by Mathis, again, limits, says that some Iowa counties have included sound limits. These range from 50 to 60 dBA. We recommend a standard no lower than 50.
When they reference best practices and stuff like that in there, I wanna ask, you got a leech on your neck? We're gonna burn you at the stake? That was best practices at one time too. I mean, come on,
Yeah,
get with it.
yep.
Sorry. Well,
So the other ones we're gonna address, we've got the proposal in the text here. Yeah, so it looks like they're in the text now. So, from page 15, start flipping the page, and if you haven't looked at the stuff that we've changed yet, and holler out if you have comment or concern.
there was
You
quite a
wanna
bit.
No, that's why I say, I mean, there was three things that I looked at your draft with the red lines and said, these are the hot points for Dave.
Okay.
And those are the things, the rest of it is like, No, I'm okay with that, I'm okay
Okay.
with that, I'm okay with that.
Did
So-
you say something about the county emergency management didn't wanna do that?
Yes, he doesn't. And that's an open issue that he
Yeah.
doesn't feel
Okay.
that's his
All right.
role.
Okay,
I might have missed it. We had talk and comments on, I brought it up at the last meeting too, about the challenging the noise within the first year or two.
That's
I
back here.
guess I didn't,
went to 3, wasn't it?
Four, it's
Four?
not 3 years.
3,
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so what I did,
After the last turbine and the
right,
project is on.
so the change, and I'd have to look and see where it's at, but what the change is, Todd, and you'll see it in here in red. The change, took away that 1 year time limit for
Yep.
complaints.
Yep.
So there's no time limit for complaints.
right?
And it extended the escrow period to 3 years. That
Okay.
after 3 years, we give their money back,
Right.
the escrow.
So when it goes to, if people still have a challenge of this, to me, this is gonna go,
The
you'll end up
county's
going through
gonna have
the
to, the
county.
county's gonna have to suck it up
Do
after
we
that
have to
third
put
year.
anything in here that says the county has to buy a meter? and do
No,
all
but that is,
or-
that is something I think we should recommend to the county board of health. That the county board of health procure a legitimate sound meter
Yeah,
that
admissible
can
in
read with
court.
these, yep, that can record it, that can accomplish these kinds of readings. So that would be the first thing that somebody does when they file a complaint with the county, is the county board of health can
And would
check it.
somebody on the Board of Health be able to run it, come out, hey, we
Yeah,
got a
they,
problem
yep,
today?
yep.
I
That, I
noticed you
think
had
that
in
should
here
be our
like 3 different
recommendation.
counts and whatever, but
Yeah, I think that should be our recommendation. I don't
Well, it doesn't
think
have
we
to be in
wanna,
here.
well, I don't think we wanna require it in a land use ordinance.
right, I understand, yep.
Yeah.
got it.
That's where the supervisors have to step up and say,
Yeah,
okay, we're gonna do this, we know there's gonna be complaints. Some of them are founded complaints,
Right,
but if this
Yeah, and you might not know
manufacturer
until you
does
check.
everything right before he puts the wind turbine up and does all the modeling,
Yep.
the chances
right.
are, I don't
Absolutely.
want this not working.
Absolutely.
So, I
They
guess.
just gotta be policed once in a while. People are gonna have
Exactly.
questions, you oughta go, Jesus, love, you know?
right. And I think having such a capability at county board of health makes sense. And in the long
Yeah.
run, I think it's gonna save the county money. But
Absolutely.
again, I think it should be a recommendation to the board, not in the ordinance.
I agree. Yep,
Okay?
yep.
So keep flipping, let me know when you run into
On
something.
22, Jeff, page 22.
Okay.
Right up there. The change 2 to 5, right here, and then
Yep.
also up there, or 2 to, yeah, you cross that one out, the migratory patterns and nesting. The 2 to 5, that's the eagles, right?
Well, so what this change did, so the developer is required as part of this clause in their final development plan to identify all of these different places.
Okay.
And originally, it said, identify, airfields, significant bodies of water, eagle nesting sites, public conservation areas, et cetera, within 2 miles of the project boundaries.
Okay,
This says, identify those things within 5 miles of the project boundaries. That's all it does.
okay,
Is it says,
They're
if
just
it's in, if
identifying
it's
them.
within
Okay.
5 miles of the project boundary, identify it.
gotcha, okay. Cross those question marks off.
I do have a highlighted part on page 23. This was originally put in after we had a conversation with Jim Hansen, when he was talking about identification of significant migratory patterns and nesting areas for birds within range of the project. As I reread that this week, I don't think we can get by with just significant migratory patterns and nesting areas for birds. I mean, think about that.
Isn't that part of DNR's recommendation and?
Well, it is, but it's too general. I got birds that nest on my property all the time. Some of them I don't
Oh.
like, some of them I like,
Correct.
right?
ones you
But
don't
they're
like, they're still
nesting
alive.
there all the time. I don't think we want to say identify all these nesting sites.
Right.
We I need to have a conversation with Jim and fix that language so that it's specific to the kinds of birds he's talking about that come in and
Migratory
fly at
birds,
Silver
yeah.
Lake.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, robins migrate in and out,
Yep.
noisy little bastards that they are.
Yep.
Yep.
Hummingbirds do.
Yep. Yeah, all the way across the
Well,
Gulf.
those
That is
barn swallows,
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I love barn swallows.
Yeah.
One of my favorite birds.
Is the barn swallow?
Yeah. All right,
Very main rafters.
keep going.
I like them too, but I
We're gonna
don't
get this
like them
done.
nesting.
Keep flipping.
Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah, the neighbor's a different bird.
He doesn't migrate, does he?
Not enough.
I need to go back and dog ear some pages here.
There was also some talk, and maybe you covered this and I missed it, there was some talk of, having the, can't get that to work. There was talk of having the escrow in place before construction versus after. And I don't remember if that was in comments somewhere. I think it was.
I think it was a.
I think it was on part of the emails.
Was it?
Yeah, somebody made the comment of having the escrow
Yes, it-
money in place before construction instead of after. I don't know if it's a trust
Yeah,
issue
I do
or,
remember that. I'm not certain what difference.
my thought is, you gotta put a down payment on the farm before you can plant corn, right? You gotta put a down payment, they're putting money into towers, they're putting money into whatever.
Yeah, but in this case though, the escrow account, in this case that they were talking about is the escrow for decommissioning.
Right,
Well, until
Yeah,
the
there's a
construction is
yeah.
done, a
true.
third party can't come in and do an evaluation to determine what it's gonna cost to take the stuff out. So I think it has to be after.
Right, point taken, yep. Next, we're gonna get this done
I
tonight.
made it to the end.
Good job.
Well, it was hard to get to the end reading it on this.
Got up a lot of mornings at 5:30 and started reading.
Oh,
Good thing is I was home alone the last 2 nights, so it was very easy just to.
I think I've been going every night since Thursday, so.
Yep. And you wanna do your due diligence and read through all the
Right,
people's
right.
comments. But some of the comments are just,
Kinda over the
Yeah.
top.
you know, it sounds bad, but, you know, at some point, you just kinda become numb to some of, cause there isn't a reason.
My favorite one, some of them I think were over the top, and they didn't provide anything constructive.
Yeah,
It was just, I hate this, or I love this. Neither of which is terribly constructive. My favorite one, though, is somebody from outside the county doesn't like our ordinance because it's gonna impact their county. Or no, it's gonna impact development in their county. And further, the only people that should have a say on anything are the people that live in the township that are gonna get a turbine. Says the person from outside the county wanting
missed
to have a
something
say.
And is this from the next county, part of this project, hopefully?
Yeah,
Okay, well, I get it.
yeah, it's,
There's something.
it was very ironic. I don't
Yeah.
think they recognized the irony
They
in what
missed
they were
some of it.
saying.
well,
I know the whole state is watching.
oh, yeah, it is, and,
Great.
well, it's like that Dr. whatever his name was, Johnson. I mean, it was very well wrote,
Right.
but I just got done and I'm like, what stake do you have in this? You know, at some point I have to think of the stake of Worth County residents,
Right.
and
That
not
and
the IEC, the whatever, and even Farm Bureau in some respects. You know, who do you listen to and who do you talk?
So he's not from Worth County or practices here or part of the board?
No,
No,
See, I didn't catch that part. I was
I
reading
think
everything you
he's
said.
just- he's-
A lot of good
he's-
information.
He's a.
So it's just a reference.
Right, he's a medical authority
Yep.
rendering an opinion.
And part of the problem, like
And-
we
and-
visited about, there's not enough education in this county about what's really going on with the contracts and what's really going on with the health aspects of these towers. It's
And-
two big blanks.
Yeah, and one of the challenges too is there's so much stuff that's out there. Some of it information, some of it is just opinion. Which is why I think we have to, we need to read everything that people have provided, but at the same time, we need to make certain that we lend more weight to those
Right.
things that are authoritative in nature, that come from state or federal agencies, peer-reviewed scientific journals. If we have a scientist or a doctor that provides opinion to us, that's great, but that's a little bit different than if that same opinion comes to us through a peer-reviewed scientific journal.
Yeah.
Because then we can have confidence that, because we don't have any other way to judge or adjudicate what it is somebody's saying.
Right. Most likely he's pulling that from those type
It
of
could very
places,
well be.
But that's not,
but, you know.
Yeah, but we're
It's an
not,
assumption.
yeah, we're not expert
Yeah, he
enough to
didn't-
be able to
he
discern
didn't-
that.
He wasn't like Loken and listed his, stuff about, okay, so there's something that I think we have missed in here.
Okay?
Growing up in a border town, this has always been a problem. What's the law on this side? You cross that imaginary line, Minnesota, county line, whatever, it's different.
Winnebago County,
Yep.
Porter
Right.
County.
Yep.
So, this is about property lines, right? And respecting our neighbors and giving everybody rights. So, what about somebody that lives a half a mile in Minnesota or in one of our other counties? Shouldn't they be able to test for sound just the same? Shouldn't we acknowledge them?
We can't. I mean, our
Why not?
well, because our responsibility and authority is contained within the confines of the county.
Okay,
Now,
The county property
if,
lines.
if, say, my notebook here is Worth County,
yep,
and I own property on this side of the line from this property, and this property, this line happens to be the Minnesota state border. There is certainly a question as to whether or not that adjacent property falls under the language of this. I think legally, the answer would be no, because by definition, this is a land use ordinance regulating land use terms in Worth County. And so even though that's an adjacent property to this property, it falls under a different jurisdiction.
I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'm saying morally, that's very questionable, because it's still a, I don't wanna say this, does that mean we gotta have verbiage in here in Worth County that says if one of the counties around us build anything, we get a 2-mile perimeter, or they have to adhere to our sound levels? Somewhere, there has to be some sort of reciprocity.
But that would be between the county governments.
Yep.
Is that something that should be asked? Cause I think it's a big deal.
I don't.
Cause sure as hell, somebody that lives
There's
100
nothing
foot on the other
that-
side of the
that-
line's gonna go, hey.
Yeah, but Iowa law, there's 2 chapters of Iowa law that provide authority for this kind of stuff. The first chapter is dealing with home rule. That is what established the ability for the county to have a legislative body called the Board of Supervisors, and the rules around the Board of Supervisors and what they can and cannot do. So they can pass ordinance, essentially regulations for the county. And then there's the chapter 335 that extends that for land use ordinances within the county, because land use wasn't described in the other chapter.
So
But
does
that authority by state law, it only grants that authority to the Board of Supervisors for the county confines.
Then is there something on the state level that regulates pollution control over a line? There's gotta be.
I think that jumps to federal.
Yep.
So there's something federally.
The
So what I'm
EPA
saying is, Joe Blow 10 foot on the other side of the Minnesota border.
He lives under those rules.
Yep.
But if he has a complaint about us, he's gotta get a hold of the feds or he gets a
Yep.
hold of Worth County.
Feds.
Feds,
The feds are what adjudicate differences between states.
it's no different than I drive 55 mile an hour till I get to Gordonsville and then I drive 60.
Yep.
Different state laws. I gotta have my wipers on in Minnesota and I don't in Iowa.
Helmets, yeah.
I mean, so there, unfortunately,
I just
we're
didn't
Worth
know-
County. We
Yeah.
can't
Right.
protect somebody in
Well, I
Fremont.
just didn't know, relationships, neighbors,
Yep.
laws, I don't know,
Yep.
I think it's very unfortunate that there isn't some sort of reciprocity or a way to be neighborly,
Yeah,
for lack of a better word.
not our
So I
problem.
just, it's just something that's been bothering me for a long time, it's something you experience in a border town or in a county line all the time.
Right. All right. So everybody's good with this? I got a couple of things I need to close out yet. I need to make the one change to remove the city limit 2 mile setback.
Yep.
Yeah.
I need to address the robins that nest in my yard, because the language requires the developer to monitor that.
And the barn swallow too.
And the barn swallows, yeah.
Let's not
There was
forget them
other-
sparrows.
There was other talk in here too of 48 versus 72 inches deep for the milling and.
That got
and
changed.
Yep,
That
that's
I
did,
think that got
okay.
changed to 72.
Yep.
Okay.
It's
And I-
changed to 72.
If that wouldn't have been changed, I would have recommended that. I live in the land of 3-foot tile lines, not deep tile lines.
Well, and you get to the point that there's something about the landowner of, we need to protect we need to decommission it because this is a viewscape.
Yeah.
Once you get below ground level, at what point isn't that the landowner's responsibility? And let's face it,
Right, but we
I
did
can
have
tile
that,
right around it.
we did
Yeah.
have that in there that I was talking about the decommissioning and be reporting, you did still
Yep.
have that.
Yep, yes.
That just, that
Yep.
covers the county from any future lawsuits.
Yep. And I need to close on the safety training and equipment. So I'll get these things done this week. I will draft up a report and recommendation that I'll share with you guys, that the report of our activities and recommendation that we would provide to the Board of Supervisors. I'll get that shared to you guys, so that we can vote on the final approval of our draft, and you guys can weigh in on the report that I draft up, and then we'll deliver that to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, hold on just a second here.
I'm pretty confident I can get all this stuff done by Friday. Does that give you guys enough time to look at this stuff?
Yeah, in case we come up with more comments, you mean, or another concern, or just?
Yeah, because what I want to do
So you're saying,
is set agenda for next week,
okay,
that we would vote on our proposed draft. We would close on and vote, if you will, on the report that we would provide to the Board of Supervisors. And then I'll schedule time on their agenda to deliver our report and recommendation to them at the first meeting following our vote Wednesday. So whatever
right.
day that would be. I think it's the
Okay.
5th. So that would be the 5th.
Oh,
Would
okay.
they meet, or would that be a holiday?
I don't know. But the
They'll
first
probably
day
meet the
after
6th.
Yeah.
They'll meet the 6th.
yeah, so the first day after we vote, the first day the supervisors meet is when I would deliver it to them.
That was too quick, what did we miss? That was
Well,
quick, I
you've
mean, it was
got,
good.
you've got till Friday. I mean, if you can get that done by Friday, so now we can have draft 3.0,
Yep,
and then I can print out 3.0 and just painstakingly go through it and, get your 2-3 hours. I don't see any reason why by next Wednesday we can't wrap it up, because all of us are kinda saying,
Yeah.
I think we're, because
I'd have a meeting on
We
Monday to
have to
do
give
it.
them something.
Exactly. You know,
It's a recommendation from us, it's not a.
What'd you say,
final.
Jeff?
I mean,
I would do it as soon as Monday, but I don't wanna, I don't wanna impose on you guys.
I was thinking if you just make those changes and that's it, I could vote on it right now, but.
Well, I think he needs to make the changes, get it
yeah, I
to
think
us.
we need to do
Yeah.
it.
And as far as I'm
Yep.
concerned, we could actually do a Zoom meeting Sunday night if you wanna be on Mondays. It's up-
I got
I'm
a
just,
birthday party that afternoon, so probably not.
yeah,
Her vote might be interesting.
It's a 7-year-old's birthday party, so.
well,
How about
let's
Friday?
meet in person then, so I get some cake.
How about a Zoom Friday night, if I get this stuff done tomorrow?
Yeah, this Friday night is in 2 days. Yeah,
If I get this stuff done tomorrow instead of going
worst
back
case
out on
scenario,
the
we got something
kayak.
else, but.
Yeah, if you get it done tomorrow, so tomorrow night,
I'm sure I'll think of something else. Afraid
But
to
if you
change.
could
Well,
have
I can get it done tomorrow so that you guys, when you come home from work, cause I don't work, I was gonna go kayaking.
It's gonna be raining severe storms all day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can get the
means I'll
stuff
be
done,
home.
so when you guys come home tomorrow night, you could print your bedtime story, and then we could have a meeting
Page
Friday night, vote on it, and we could be in the Board of Supervisors Monday morning, or I could be in the Board of
So you're gonna
Supervisors.
set up with Joel if we're gonna have a 7 o'clock Zoom on Friday night?
I could. If that works for everybody,
that works.
if you guys are willing to take that on,
If we come up with other changes,
I
we can
can.
hopefully
I don't
finish
know.
that Friday night again.
if there are light changes and everybody
Next night,
agrees
yep.
that we can make the changes like we did that one time,
Yeah,
okay?
I'm fine, let's get it over with, cause I think we're,
I
I think this baby's put to,
I mean,
yeah, here it is.
yeah,
You wanna change 1,600 to
whatever.
a residence versus a property line, that's
prerogative.
your baby,
Yeah.
you wanna. Yeah, I'm not, setbacks are a little bit of a point, but to me, everything that I'm hearing people complain about is noise.
Yeah,
And when you put that noise at my property line,
yeah, that solves a lot of it, no,
I mean, yeah, I mean, the rest of it,
And that's where the majority of the health concerns come from too, is not just the high frequency noise, it's them low, that's where a lot of the health problems come in.
and causes people so they can't sleep. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really where the problem is that noise and sleeping is what I'm hearing.
It's the biggest one anyway.
Okay, so, we